You know, when I went to film school, everybody said, well, you're nuts. What are you going to film school for?
Star Wars may have started out as a mere movie, but it became a phenomenon.
It's just a never-ending visual delight.
What do kids have these days for entertainment?
We never thought we'd be reviewed by Time magazine.
It was amazing. It was everything I thought it was going to be and more.
I thought Lucas did a really good job.
The Walt Disney Company is acquiring Lucasfilm.
Maybe we should have just left well enough alone.
George always said to me, I will never, ever give up my company. And guess what? He sold it.
And I was hit broadside by a car that was going about 90 miles an hour. I should be dead.
May 14th, 1944, George Lucas is born in Modesto, California, a town known for its colorful and vibrant community. With a population of around 26,000 people, the culture there was booming, making it the perfect place for many great local restaurants, along with large festivals. However, George was a homebody, and preferred the comfort of being indoors, where he would watch and read many great cartoons and comics.
And furthermore, I promises.
This began to spark his interest in fantasy stories. He enjoyed being able to watch or read something and just fall into the character or story. This was vastly expanded upon when he watched the 1950s Flash Gordon film.
You keep your slimy hands off her!
As it was George's first look into the world of science fiction, something that he would grow to obsess over, planting the seed for what would later become the greatest piece of science fiction ever created. Sadly though, this obsession would have to wait, because naturally as he got older, his interests would change. So he started to pick up a new hobby.
Another champion is born. Baker's average time almost 93 miles an hour.
From here on out, he would become fascinated with cars, or more specifically, going fast. He began hanging around repair shops, garages, and car meets. George even took part in multiple circuit races at fairgrounds, which helped satisfy his thrill for racing, until the day came when he turned 16, where he would buy his first car. Throughout all of his high school career, he worked on that same car, souping it up so he could race with his friends. The rush he got from these moments made it all feel worth it. Sure, it was a risk, but it was the happiest he had ever felt.
In high school, I had a very little car, and I was turning into my driveway. There was this guy, so he was going about 90 miles an hour. I didn't see him coming. I hear a horn honk, and then I'm gone. They hit me broadside. My car rolled about 7 or 8 times, wrapped around a tree.
Somehow, George managed to survive this deadly crash. Lucky for him, his seatbelt broke off, throwing him out the window. However, when the ambulance arrived on scene, he didn't have a heartbeat. They rushed him to the hospital with several broken bones and bruised lungs. George was fighting for his life, as the doctors had no idea if he would live or not. But within a few hours, he miraculously regained consciousness. Over the next few months, he spent all of his time thinking about how most racers involved in high-speed crashes weren't lucky enough to make it out of it alive. He also thought about the racing belt that he had installed into his car, and how if it wouldn't have broken, then he would have been crushed against the tree.
You know, it did give me this perspective on life that said, you know, basically I'm operating on extra credit, therefore I can do anything I want.
He still enjoyed racing as a sport, but shortly after turning 18, he left the hospital. He decided that he was done racing. Instead, he started photographing races from afar. Around this time, he would meet one of his greatest friends, Haskell Wexler. They both shared similar interests, that being racing and photography. Seeing George's potential, he encouraged him to join the University of Southern California.
I made lots of movies while I was in school. Meanwhile, all the other guys were going around saying, oh, I wish I could make a movie, I wish I was in production class.
I'm the 33rd recipient of the AFI Life Achievement Award, George Lucas.
It was a big moment for me, because I really did sit down with myself and say, okay, now I am a director.
I'm incredibly honored, but a little bewildered, I must say. This is what I want to do. I want to make my movie.
USC would fully bring back his obsession with stories and science fiction. He quickly got to writing the idea for his first film ever, THX 1138. Now, this movie was by no means a hit, but it was a start.
THX 1138 is a reworked and expanded version of a student film Lucas made at the University of Southern California.
You see, during one of his classes, he met future filmmaker Steven Spielberg. The two quickly became friends as they had the same dreams, making big-time films along with telling really good science fiction stories. Of course, this would become a lifelong friendship, as the two would even work together on the Indiana Jones films. Nevertheless, George Lucas became enthralled with the amount of effort and skill that it took to create a movie. He was also doing very well in school, leading him to graduate with a Bachelor in the Fine Arts of Filmmaking in 1967. 4 years later, he would release THX 1138, where it was met with very mixed reviews, many of which not being good. However, this wouldn't stop George, as he was young and determined to make a hit.
After I finished THX, didn't quite know what to do. Francis had challenged me to do something warm and fuzzy.
I was very much advising that George focus on writing.
Fast forward 2 years after the release of his first ever film, where George would work with Francis Coppola to create something that was way out of his comfort zone, American Graffiti.
You go on over there and you remember all the good times you won't be having. I ain't going off some goddamn fancy college. I'm staying right here.
This film was pretty much just a coming-of-age story infused with drama and comedy. Although the main upside about this film from his last one is just how well it was received.
When I did THX, it sort of came and it went, and I did American Graffiti, and I got all this feedback from people who had seen the film, how important it was to their life and what a difference it made in their life. And
this was his first big success. He managed to make a great film with a budget of only $700,000, earning a total of $200 million in box office sales. Soon after this, he would create his own company, Lucasfilm, where he would try to ride off of the success of American Graffiti to get the green light to make a Flash Gordon film. George wanted to return to his roots, paying homage to what inspired him from a young age. But when he couldn't get the rights for it, he started working on his own space adventure, titled Star Wars.
But Star Wars is an amazing film.
In only 9 days, Star Wars has grossed more money than any movie in Dallas history.
You know the good guys.
Yeah.
You got the hero and his buddy who go to get the princess, right? Leia.
Yeah.
And it's all of those composite things together, and it's just for pure fun. You don't have to sit and say, what is the message behind this?
No.
When George began to write, he pitched the idea of a space adventure film to different studios. Even though his last movie did good, they knew how poorly his last science fiction film went. So time and time again, he was shut down. This didn't discourage him though. If anything, it made him want to make this film even more. George knew that it might come down to him making the movie with his own budget. But luckily for him, Alan Ladd, who worked at 20th Century Fox, noticed his work. They quickly came to an agreement that would give George the budget to push the envelope for what was visually possible at the time.
Visual effects create the magic that makes people want to go to the movies, because they can see things they can't see any other way.
In 1975, filming began for Star Wars A New Hope. Off the start, things seemed to be going fairly smooth, until George realized just how close they were getting to their deadline. The stress was starting to weigh on him, getting so bad that he was having chest pains, leading him to believe he was having a heart attack.
I was having severe chest pains. They took me to the hospital because they thought I might be having a heart attack. They said, "Have you been under a lot of pressure?" I said, "Yeah."
Although it would turn out to be a false alarm, as it was simply a result from all the stress building up. All of this would lead to an entire year of filming before the first edit was even made. And after George's wife at the time, Marcia Lucas, saw it, she was in pure disbelief of just how bad it was.
I was burned out. I was fried. My brain was fried. I was fried. I was probably sleep deprived. I wanted time out.
This would cause Marcia to take control of the film, working long hours to fix the mistakes by cutting tons of pointless footage. In many ways, the success of A New Hope was largely due to Marcia's second edit on the film, because if she wouldn't have been there to give her opinions on it, who knows how it would have turned out. A couple of months later, the film was ready to be shown to the world. The first screen test of the film went okay. Some thought it was good, while others believed it was doomed to fail. Lucas believed it was a great film, but he was prepared for it to meet the same fate as THX 1138. Lucky for him though, that couldn't have been further from the truth.
This has left me practically utterly speechless, actually, but it was the best one ever.
Do you think it was worth coming to this late at night?
Yeah! The movie was perfect. It was exactly the way it had to be. It was a fantastic movie, but it was good.
The film was an instant hit with fans. Even though it was originally only shown at 43 theaters across America, it still managed to gain $1.5 million in its opening week. That number would eventually 40 times itself, totaling up to roughly $460 million. To give you a bit of perspective, The Rise of Skywalker made around $500 million. However, this was in 2019, so 42 years ago, that amount of money on a film like this was very unheard of. Throughout the next 6 years, 2 more films would be made, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. They were both well received by fans, helping plant the Star Wars franchise firmly in pop culture history. George was a major success, but with that came major problems.
Unfortunately, when you get married, you always believe you're going to be the old people sitting on the park bench. You're going to be walking through the park holding hands, in your 80s. But we didn't get there. But the 20 years we spent together were wonderful.
And I know of one time George said to me, I still love her, and I would take her back.
I don't know if I'll ever see him or speak to him again in this lifetime. But I would just be sad.
You see, the production of the first film created a huge strain between him and his wife. Whether it was because he wasn't spending enough time with her, or their collaboration on A New Hope is neither here nor there, but what's for certain is that it would lead to their divorce in June of 1983. This would result in George taking a 16-year hiatus from directing, as he would have both Irvin Kershner and Richard Marquand direct episodes 5 and 6. George himself wouldn't return to the Star Wars franchise until 1993, where he started writing episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
This is the 1st of November, 1994. Today is my first day of writing the new Star Wars series. I'm all set. All I need is an idea.
This was the first time he had even begun directing a film in over 2 decades. He was reluctant to return to Star Wars, yet he always wanted to expand upon Darth Vader's story, so he created the prequel trilogy. A lot of time went into making sure everything made sense, and didn't mess with the original films. However, when pre-production began, his love for Star Wars returned. He got to help push the boundaries for CGI at the time with Jar Jar Binks and do things that were not physically possible in 1977. George felt like he was on track to make another great trilogy, but when the film was released in May of 1999, it was met with very negative reviews.
I mean, I don't want to bag the movie, but I really didn't think I cared about the characters.
I'm not too big on the acting, but hey, that's just me.
You didn't like it?
No, I think I deserve a public apology from George Lucas.
As the next 2 films were released, they would both see better reviews. Still, some fans felt like they were missing something, or that the prequels didn't amount to their expectations. So for the next 3 years, George and his team started a new project, something that they knew would change Star Wars forever, the Clone Wars. In 2008, the first ever Star Wars animated series came out. They used the show to fill in the gaps between episodes 1 and 3. Pretty much off the start though, fans thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though it was targeted for kids, it still held some pretty crucial moments in the story. George was glad to be working on something refreshing. Getting into animation was something he was fond of since he was a child, and it felt like he was paying it forward to what originally sparked his curiosity. Throughout all 7 seasons of the show, not a single one ruined it for fans. It was clear to everyone that Star Wars was on the rise once again. However, around this time, he would be faced with his biggest decision yet, one that would change the Star Wars franchise forever.
I am proud to announce the Walt Disney Company is acquiring Lucasfilm.
George felt like he was backed into a corner because he wasn't getting any younger. He didn't know if he would still be alive when it came to directing the 3rd trilogy, although he also just simply wanted to retire and live his life. So he made the choice to sell Star Wars to Disney for $4 billion. After he signed the contract, he also gave them his plans for the 3rd and final trilogy, where he made an entire book for the plot of the 3 films. Sadly, Disney never used any of these ideas, so we will never know just how much different these sequels could have actually been. Nevertheless, George was still involved in what they were working on, even though he felt like he was being sidelined from his own work. He then decided to leave behind Star Wars for good, as he really didn't feel welcome. Years later, Disney would release Episode 7, The Force Awakens. To say that George was disappointed would be a complete understatement. He didn't see the passion in the films, claiming that they were unoriginal and just used the nostalgia of the old films to lure in fans, basically riding off the success of the other trilogies. He even straight up told J.J. Abrams that there was nothing new. You see, in every one of his films, George always tried to do something fresh or impossible, whether that be through the story or visuals. This was undoubtedly a major reason why the first 2 trilogies worked. After he saw the fans respond similarly to him about the movie, he began to think about how Disney could ruin the world he had built, and as the days passed, it really started to get to him. He would constantly wonder if he should have sold, or if he should have just made the movies himself. The first 2 trilogies were his pride and joy. He met so many great people on the sets of those films, and even though the fans still enjoyed them, he had to watch Disney slowly destroy something that he worked so hard to build.
And everything in your body says don't, you can't. And these are my kids. So
all those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are my, I loved them, I created them.
So even though he has moved on from Star Wars, I guarantee somewhere deep down he still regrets signing that paper.